Imagine America, a Titan awakening. The late 19th century was not merely a passage of time. It was an epoch, a roaring forge, where the very fabric of a nation was being hammered into something new, something colossal. Cities swelled, railways snaked across a continent, and from the crucible of innovation emerged industries so vast they reshaped the world. This was the Gilded Age, a period of breathtaking progress gilded with astonishing wealth. Yet beneath its shimmering surface, profound inequalities festered. It was an era defined by grand visions and ruthless ambition, an age that birthed both unprecedented philanthropy and unimaginable human cost. At the heart of this tumultuous transformation stood one man, a figure whose legacy remains as complex and contradictory as the nation he helped build, Andrew Carnegie. His story began far from the towering smokestacks of industrial Pennsylvania. Born in Dunfermline, Scotland in 1835, Carnegie arrived in America as a penniless immigrant boy, landing in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, with his family. His early life was a classic American narrative of grit and relentless upward mobility. He worked in a cotton mill as a bobbin boy at 13, earning just $1.20 a week, a sum that bought him not only bread, but a potent understanding of hardship and the relentless grind of labor. From there, he climbed telegraph messenger, railway superintendent, always learning, always observing, always seeking the next opportunity to leverage his sharp intellect and even sharper business acumen. He saw potential where others saw only iron and coal, envisioning the skeletal framework of a modern world built from steel. Carnegie didn't just participate in the Industrial Revolution. He mastered it. He built an empire, Carnegie Steel Company, not through luck, but through an almost fanatical dedication to efficiency, innovation, and aggressive vertical integration. He owned the mines that extracted the iron ore, the ships and railroads that transported it, the coke ovens that processed it, and the mills that forged it into the very arteries of a growing nation. Steel, once a luxury, became the bedrock of skyscrapers, bridges, and railways, and Carnegie became its undisputed king. His factories, sprawling behemoths of fire and noise, churned out steel at a pace and scale previously unimaginable, propelling America into an era of unprecedented industrial might. This was the material embodiment of progress, forged in the intense heat and relentless rhythm of his mills. As his fortune swelled to astronomical proportions, Andrew Carnegie began to articulate a philosophy that would forever define his public image, the Gospel of Wealth. Published in 1889, this seminal essay declared that the wealthy had a moral obligation to use their fortunes to improve society, rather than hoarding it or passing it down to heirs. He argued that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. For Carnegie, the most effective way to uplift humanity was through education and self-improvement, through institutions that would give others the tools to climb, just as he had. He poured millions into building thousands of public libraries across the United States, in towns large and small, a beacon of learning accessible to all. These Carnegie libraries, grand edifices of stone and intellect, became the tangible symbols of his public benevolence, proof of a titan who gave back, a testament to the idea that capitalism, when guided by conscience, could be a force for profound social good. To this day, the sight of a Carnegie library evokes a sense of historical gravitas, a reminder of a bygone era's commitment to communal learning. But even as these temples of knowledge rose, brick by brick, across the American landscape, another story was unfolding, largely hidden from the public eye. The colossal wealth that funded these libraries, the very foundation of Carnegie's philanthropy, was not conjured from thin air. It was forged in the fire and sweat of men who labored under conditions so brutal, so dangerous, that they beggar belief today. The steel mills were infernos, deafening and deadly. Workers toiled 12 hours a day, 6 or even 7 days a week, often for meager wages that barely sustained their families. Accidents were rampant, limbs lost, bodies crushed, lives extinguished in a moment of molten steel or collapsing machinery. There was no workers' compensation, no safety net, just the raw, unceasing demand for production. These were not anonymous cogs in a machine. They were fathers, brothers, sons, risking everything for a paycheck that kept them just above destitution. The Homestead Steel Works, Carnegie's crown jewel, epitomized this stark duality. While Carnegie championed education and opportunity from his Scottish castles and New York mansions, the men at Homestead were grappling with the grim realities of industrial capitalism. They saw their wages cut, their hours extended, and their lives treated as expendable resources in the relentless pursuit of profit. How could the same man who believed in lifting humanity simultaneously preside over an industrial regime that, for many, was grinding humanity into dust? Was the provision of books truly a sufficient balm for the broken bodies and shattered spirits of the men who made his empire possible? This fundamental tension between the dazzling public spectacle of philanthropy and the grim, often unseen, reality of its genesis formed the core contradiction of Andrew Carnegie's legacy. As the 19th century drew to a close, this simmering conflict, this profound hypocrisy, was about to erupt, threatening to expose the dark underbelly of America's Gilded Age. The question remained, when the forces of wealth, power, and human dignity inevitably clashed, who would truly pay the price for progress? The Gilded Age, shimmering with innovation and prosperity, cast long, deep shadows, particularly over the lives of those who forged its very foundations. Andrew Carnegie, the proclaimed steward of wealth, lived in a world far removed from the deafening clang and molten inferno of his steel mills. While his public persona was meticulously cultivated as the benevolent benefactor, the reality within his industrial empire was starkly different. This was not a world of libraries and self-improvement. It was a battleground, where the relentless pursuit of profit clashed violently with the fundamental human desire for dignity and survival. The stage was set, and the tension, building like pressure in a superheated boiler, was about to explode. At the heart of this volatile environment was the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, one of the most powerful craft unions of its time. For years, they had secured decent wages and working conditions for their skilled members within the Carnegie Empire, particularly at the crown jewel, the Homestead Steel Works outside Pittsburgh. But the very existence of a strong union was anathema to Carnegie's business philosophy. He believed in individual meritocracy, a system where he, the benevolent capitalist, dictated terms, and workers, in turn, worked hard for their opportunities. Union solidarity, to him, was an impediment to efficiency, a drain on profits, and an affront to his unilateral control. It was a challenge he was determined to crush. To execute this grim strategy, Carnegie employed a man as hard and unyielding as the steel they produced, Henry Clay Frick. Often dubbed the most hated man in America, Frick was a cold, calculating industrialist known for his brutal efficiency and uncompromising anti-union stance. While Carnegie frequently retreated to his Scottish estates, cultivating his image as a thoughtful philosopher king, Frick remained on the front lines, the iron fist of the Carnegie Steel Company. He was the hatchet man, the one who would do the dirty work, allowing Carnegie to maintain a veneer of detached benevolence. Frick's mission was clear: break the amalgamated, eliminate any obstacle to absolute managerial control, and drive down labor costs even further. The inevitable confrontation began to brew in 1892. The union contract at Homestead was set to expire, and Frick, with Carnegie's explicit blessing, saw his opportunity. He presented the workers with a drastic proposal, a significant wage reduction, particularly for the skilled rollers, and the complete dismantling of the union's power. It wasn't a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. The stakes were immense. For the workers, it was about more than just a pay cut. It was about their livelihoods, their families' futures, and the very right to collectively bargain for a fair share of the immense wealth they were generating. For Carnegie and Frick, it was about total control, about proving that capital, not labor, held the ultimate power in industrial America. Could any human cost be too high in the relentless pursuit of maximized profit? As the deadline approached, Frick transformed the Homestead plant into a fortress. He constructed a 12-foot-high fence topped with barbed wire, riddled with portholes for rifles, earning it the ominous nickname Fort Frick. Inside, security guards patrolled, and preparations were made for a complete lockout. The message was unmistakable. If the workers didn't accept the terms, they would be replaced by force if necessary. This was not merely an industrial dispute. It was a declaration of war. The raw fear and desperation that gripped the Homestead workers must have been palpable. They were up against not just a company, but a colossal financial and political machine, seemingly untouchable. When the workers rejected Frick's terms on June 29, 1892, the gates of Homestead clanged shut. The lockout was official. Frick wasted no time, dispatching agents to hire replacement workers or scabs from across the country. But the most provocative move came on July 5th. Under the cover of darkness, 300 armed Pinkerton agents were ferried up the Monongahela River on barges. They intended to land at the mill and secure it for the strikebreakers. This was a direct, militarized assault on the workers' solidarity, an act designed to provoke and intimidate. The workers, fully aware of the Pinkertons' reputation for violence, had been monitoring the river, and they were ready. What followed was a brutal, bloody battle, a scene ripped from a frontier conflict rather than an industrial dispute. As the barges attempted to land, Homestead workers and their families, who had gathered en masse, met the Pinkertons with gunfire, rocks, and even sticks of dynamite. For over 12 hours, a desperate siege unfolded. The banks of the river became a war zone, with casualties mounting on both sides. Pinkertons fired into the crowd, and workers in turn tried to set the barges ablaze. The sheer ferocity of the resistance stunned Frick and the company. Eventually, outmaneuvered and under relentless attack, the Pinkertons surrendered, suffering significant injuries and at least 3 dead. The workers, for a brief, triumphant moment, had held their ground. But their victory was fleeting. The state of Pennsylvania, under the direct appeal of Frick, quickly mobilized, deploying 8,500 state militia troops to Homestead to break the strike. The aftermath was devastating. Thousands were blacklisted, unions were crushed, and Andrew Carnegie's philanthropic image was forever stained by the blood of Homestead, exposing the dark cost of the Gilded Age. The smoke from the guns at Homestead eventually cleared, but the scars etched onto the American industrial landscape, and indeed onto the soul of the nation, remained. The crushing defeat of the Amalgamated Association was more than just a union bust. It was a brutal demonstration of the raw power wielded by unchecked capital, a chilling precedent that would reverberate through labor history for decades. Andrew Carnegie, initially ensconced in his Scottish castle at Scabo, later returned to face the music, though his public statements were always carefully curated, expressing regret for the violence while never truly condemning the actions of his ruthless enforcer, Henry Clay Frick. Carnegie maintained that he was merely upholding the principles of individual liberty against the tyranny of union control, a convenient narrative that neatly sidestepped the dire working conditions and suppressed wages that fueled his empire. His absence during the bloodiest moments allowed him to maintain a degree of psychological distance, preserving his self-image as the enlightened capitalist even as his company became a symbol of industrial oppression. The Homestead Strike marked a pivotal moment, a violent climax in the ongoing struggle between labor and capital in America. For a brief, terrifying period, the myth of the benevolent industrialist was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of armed conflict and state-sanctioned violence against workers. Yet, remarkably, Andrew Carnegie's public image not only recovered, but soared to unprecedented heights. The underlying contradiction, however, never truly disappeared. It merely receded from public view, a dark secret lurking beneath the shining facade of his immense philanthropy. The question that continued to haunt his legacy, and indeed ours, was how could a man who inspired such brutality simultaneously become the world's most generous giver? The answer, perhaps, lay in a decisive turning point in 1901. At the age of 66, Andrew Carnegie sold his steel empire to financier J.P. Morgan for an astonishing $480 million, a sum equivalent to hundreds of billions in today's money, making him, by some estimates, the richest man in the world. This was his true exit from the brutal world of industrial production and his full entry into the realm of full-time philanthropy. With the stroke of a pen, The responsibility for managing the mills and their contentious labor relations transferred to others, freeing Carnegie to dedicate the remainder of his life to practicing the gospel of wealth he had so ardently preached. He transformed from the Steel King to the King of Philanthropy, a metamorphosis that was as strategic as it was genuinely altruistic. From this point, Carnegie's giving became legendary. He distributed nearly 90% of his vast fortune, over $350 million, to various charitable causes. His most enduring legacy, of course, was the proliferation of Carnegie libraries. Over 2,500 public libraries were built across the English-speaking world, transforming access to knowledge and opportunity for millions. These were not mere buildings. They were anchors of communities, hubs of learning, and symbols of social mobility. Beyond libraries, he endowed universities, established the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and funds for scientific research, pensions for college professors, and even church organs. He genuinely believed in the power of education, peace, and scientific advancement to lift humanity, echoing his own journey from poverty to immense wealth through self-improvement and learning. But the question persists. Can the immense good of his later life erase the ethical stain of his earlier wealth accumulation? Can the wisdom and inspiration found in thousands of library books truly compensate for the lives lost, the bodies broken, and the spirits crushed in the mills that funded them? This is the profound paradox at the heart of Andrew Carnegie's legacy. His libraries, built with the blood and sweat of exploited labor, stand as majestic monuments to human potential, yet they simultaneously cast a long shadow, reminding us of the brutal costs hidden beneath the veneer of progress. They are, in a sense, a physical manifestation of a profound societal tension that continues to resonate today. Modern parallels are striking. We live in an era where tech billionaires accumulate unprecedented wealth, often through disruptive practices that strain labor laws, exploit data, or create vast inequalities. When these same billionaires engage in grand philanthropic gestures, establishing foundations, funding initiatives, or building institutions, we are compelled to ask similar questions. Does the end justify the means? Does the act of giving absolve one of the ethical compromises made in the accumulation of wealth? Are we, as a society, too quick to celebrate the gifts, without critically examining the conditions under which they were acquired? Carnegie's story forces us to grapple with the ethics of capitalism itself, and the societal contract between those who generate wealth and those whose labor makes it possible. Andrew Carnegie died in 1919, having truly given away almost all his fortune, fulfilling his gospel of wealth. He left behind a legacy that is simultaneously inspiring and deeply troubling. He was a visionary who accelerated America's industrial might and democratized access to knowledge on an unprecedented scale. Yet he was also an unapologetic union buster whose wealth was built on a foundation of dangerous work, low wages, and a brutal disregard for human cost. His story is a powerful, enduring lesson not in simple good versus evil, but in the profound, often uncomfortable, complexities of human ambition, moral compromise, and the indelible mark left on history by figures who embody both light and shadow. The Carnegie Libraries stand tall, shining beacons of learning, but for those who know their full story, they also serve as silent, stone reminders of the exploitation that often underlies immense fortunes, prompting us to forever question the true cost of progress. What, ultimately, does society value more, the magnanimity of the gift or the integrity of its origin? And can we ever truly separate the two?